I work at a national park you've never heard of. We aren't allowed to acknowledge the doors in the canyon walls. There are doors on the sides of the canyon walls. You don't open those doors. You don't pay them too much attention. But twice a month, when the moon is cut perfectly in half, you do go lock those doors. Ah, I get it, I said, my first week stationed at the park. Initiation. I'm the new guy. Your egos demand some benign rite of passage before I'm allowed to make friends with you all. My chief ranger didn't smile. She didn't even blink. I held up my arms in surrender. It's fine. Really. I did my time in a frat. I'll do whatever you tell me if it makes the other rangers happy. Want me to watch these doors every night instead of sleep? Paint chicken's blood on them? Whatever it is, I'm game. And I was game. Extremely so. My position here was only a seasonal one. If they wanted me to commit murder for them, commit murder I would if it would keep me here longer than the summer. Stay away from the doors, was all Chief told me. That was that. They weren't a joke. I realized that quickly. The doors in the canyon walls were no joke, and neither was the park. The other rangers were nice enough, morning greetings at employee housing and all that, but Ebony Gorge itself, the actual park, the longer I worked there, the less it made sense. In the mornings, the birds were silent. From sunset until nightfall they would chirp, but otherwise, they would only stare from the trees. Visitors never came twice. In the online reservation database, there was no record of somebody staying at our campsites more than a single time, and none that I spoke with in the visitor center mentioned a previous visit. Not once. Even the landscape ignored logic. The surrounding terrain was desert, steep mesa cliffsides and textured, sandstone hoodoos. Within the gorge itself, though, it was lush green forest. There was no grand river to supply the water. It hardly rained. And yet, somehow the foliage thrived. Looking back now, I should have been more suspicious when I got the job. The National Park Service isn't the military, which sounds obvious but is actually pretty misunderstood. We aren't assigned anywhere. We don't get deployed or stationed or signed on for a contractual quantity of years. Most of the time, we apply for job listings the same as anyone, and the competition is stiff. You'd be surprised how many people dream of being an underpaid, overworked government worker. I shouldn't have had much of a shot at this position, even if it was seasonal. During my university summers, I would volunteer at the state park near my school, but apart from that I didn't have the right qualifications. I'd studied biology. I worked in a nutrition research lab for 3 years. Sure, I spent my time off backpacking, but when I applied to be a ranger at an unlisted national park, it was spur of the moment, on a whim, zero expectations. After a round of interviews, the job was mine. I was so excited, I barely blinked when they informed me the park I would be working at was named Ebony Gorge. A park I'd never heard of, without a single mention anywhere online. And when I arrived, and there were doors pressed into the canyon walls, I still didn't blink. That's what you do when you're desperate, and you only have one chance left. You don't flinch. You merely look the other way, with a smile on your face. Some had brass handles. Some had hinges. Some were made entirely of wood, or metal, or were simply the outline of a door painted on the stone like petroglyphs. They had only 2 things in common. They were all far from any public walking trail, and they were all firmly shut. I'd come to Ebony Gorge to hide from my real life. I was so relieved that I'd been accepted, that I was alright following the cryptic rules. I could ignore the oddities. I refrained from questions about the occasional purple pulsing vein on a tree or who was responsible for the 10-foot-tall cairns you would sometimes come across deep in the backcountry. The ones dripping with blood. I could stand ignoring the doors, because staying here was worth it to the alternative of going home. Until it wasn't. Next time is your turn, Winona, our chief ranger, told me days before the next quarter moon. End of the week. Then a few days later, get lots of sleep. You'll need it. The day before my turn in the rotation, she even mentioned it twice. Tomorrow. And later, be ready. By the end, I couldn't help but laugh at her concern. Winona was less talkative than a boulder, and yet here she was, fretting about the effectiveness of my daily planner. Don't worry, Winnie, I told her. I'll remember. I swear it on. Hang on, what was your religion again? I swear it on whoever that deity was. Reassuring, yeah? It's Winona. The lips on her ever-expressionless face turned downwards. Better yet, Chief. Right. Despite my insistence, however, I was caught unaware when she shook me awake in the dead of the night. I overslept. I'm coming. At least, I tried to say that. In my groggy state it came out as something more akin to Sir Verversal McMinn. I followed her to the ranger station, locked my radio onto my belt, and grabbed the set of bone-white keys from the wall hook. By this time, I was fairly cognizant once more. Shouldn't I have a partner? Not tonight. He can't make it, and the East Side Ranger already left. Let's just call this your initiation. I see what you did there. Go quick. Make sure you lock all of them by sunrise. If it gets light before you finish, stop immediately. That's not the preferred outcome, but they should technically already be locked. Absolutely no touching the doors themselves. You remember which way to turn the key? Right to lock. Twist left to lock. Have you been listening at all? Sorry. What are you waiting for? You're late enough as is. Sorry. But even as I stumbled towards the door, frantic to please as ever, there was one more thing I had to ask. You said they should all be locked already, and if one isn't? They will be. She paused. But if one isn't, you run. You run fast or you don't. It's really the same either way. What did that mean? I'm not sure I now, go. Sorry. I went. The night was dark. That's a silly thing to say, but there's a galaxy of difference between the blackness of the suburbs and the blackness of a designated dark sky national park. My light shone red on ridged tree trunks, as twigs, leaves, and dirt crunched underfoot. I reached the first door quickly, a cedarwood frame with gold trimming. I stared at it. We weren't supposed to look at them directly, but tonight was different. The longer I stared, the harder it was to even tell if the door really existed. Perhaps it was merely a crinkle in reality. A mirage in the universe. Even after months of working at Ebony Gorge, I'd never been able to shake the feeling of eyes on my neck. It didn't matter how many solo hikes I went on. They watched from the trees, the sky, the ground, in the day and at night. Could there ever exist a worse sensation? Being perceived. Tonight, as I stared at the door, it stared back. I inserted the key, careful not to let my hand brush the actual door, and twisted left. My beating heart calmed. Easy enough. The process went smoothly. Ebony Gorge was big, but another ranger was already covering the east side, and I had one of the ranger four-wheelers to drive me between locations. I went door to door, locking as I went, checking at least, determined to prove myself my first time in rotation. Sometimes, an hour would go by between stops, miles of hiking, but there was more than enough time to make it to every location. Enough time for me to realize. There were no cricket chirps near the doors. No rustling in the underbrush. The closer you got to them, the less even the wind would blow. I took longest at the door that was only a drawing on the rock face. 4. Several minutes, I frowned at it, before finally noticing a hole in the painted doorknob, just where a keyhole should be. When I inserted the key, it twisted with the satisfying chink of a lock being turned just like the others. One more door, and I would officially be done. I was so ready to finish, I barely saw the door itself as I approached. It was the furthest into the woods, nearly 2 miles from any sort of service road. My nerves mingled with the relief of knowing I could finally go back to my lodge and crawl under warm sheets. It wasn't until I'd nearly reached the door that I realized what was different this time. It was open. That couldn't be right. Winona had said they would be locked. I was so close to being done, and this was my very first rotation. What were the chances? Would she blame me if she found out? You need to run. Instead, I stood there. Not a bird flapped its wings. Not a leaf rustled. And then, from the pitch-black opening beyond the discarded doorway, came a breeze the temperature of a summer's day. Warm, heavy, and sticky. A second later, it stopped. It came once more. The intake-release of it was familiar. Like the push and pull of a heating vent in the winter. Like something that I was at the cusp of remembering but couldn't quite name. Run. Go. Run now. Footsteps started. Not mine. Somewhere far past the lip of the doorway, bare feet slapped on bare stone. They grew louder, more frantic, speeding up. They drew closer. Closer. Nearly here. Just before the pounding reached me, I threw myself at the door and hurled it shut. Something slammed at it from the other side, but I was already inserting the key, twisting it left, slumping to the dirt, leaning against the canyon wall, listening at the door, heart pounding, listening. Some minutes passed, at least 10. Finally, there was the muffled sound of the thing on the other side of the door padding back the way it had come. I waited at least another half an hour, there on the ground, in the total silence of the night. It wasn't until I'd hung the bone-white keys back at the ranger station and was in my bed, moments from passing out, that I finally realized what the breeze from the doorway had reminded me of. Breathing. I got what sleep I could, then reported for my shift just after noon. Before I headed to the visitors center, my post for the day, there was a conversation I needed to have first. Something happened last night, I told Winona in her office. Something you should probably know about. I steeled myself to explain the situation, already bracing for her subsequent reaction and blaming, but she spoke first. Whatever it was, you'd better at least have gotten sleep. Sleep? Why? What for? She blinked at me. Goodness, and you were so annoyed when I kept reminding you. Your shift locking up? Tonight? Every quarter moon? No, even as I protested, every ounce of dread from last night returned. But you woke me up hours ago. I slept in, remember? That all already happened last night. Couldn't have. Quarter moons tonight. You woke me yourself, I tried one last time. She glanced at her bulletin board and my gaze followed hers. A calendar was thumbtacked to it with a bold blue circle drawn around today's date, the quarter moon. I couldn't have woken you. Winona's face darkened. I was asleep the whole night. Next part. Alone with my thoughts. Contents: 1 first entry, 2 second entry, 3 third entry, 4 fourth entry, 5 fifth entry, 6 final entry. First entry: Dear Diary, I am alone. Everyone is gone. Why? I don't know why. I woke up in my bed and everyone was just gone. There was a note on my chest simply saying thank you. I don't know what that means either. All of today I walked around looking for somebody, anybody, anything. It was as if every living creature on the earth just vanished. Even grass and trees. It's all just gone. Then I went back to my house. I didn't know what to do. I cooked myself some food, or should I say opened a can of refried beans. That was 10 years ago. I have done the same thing for 10 years. I am writing in this diary to try and preserve some sense of normalcy and sanity. I know I've lost it anyway, after all I am talking to a notebook as if it were a person. I travel along steadily looking for some kind of clue as to what has happened. Everything looks exactly the same as the day everyone disappeared, as if they just got up and left. The power's out, which means no radio broadcasts. Trust me, I've tried, hoping that there might be some hint as to what happened. I sleep where I want to sleep. After all, it's not as if their owners are coming back anytime soon. I wish I could tell you my name and age, but I can't. I don't remember. Second entry, Dear Diary, I am walking through the capital of the US. I can't quite remember its name, everything is so fuzzy now. But that doesn't matter. What does matter is that I have found something that is alive. A dandelion. It is my pet. I have named him Dandy, and for once I have a companion. I tried feeding it some canned tomatoes, but it didn't work. I don't know why. Doesn't it want to live? I guess the food does taste kind of bad now. Even I can't always keep it down, and it sometimes wreaks havoc on my insides. I put the dandelion in the can in case it got hungry later. Third entry, Dear Diary, today is sad. My only friend is dead. Dandy is dead. I buried him. I cried. I cried for so long I threw up, wasting the precious foodstuffs I had consumed earlier. I scraped what I could of the vomit in the can Dandy had been living in. I figured I might need it later. I am living in the White House. I feel very important, like that one guy, who was important. Oh well, it doesn't matter now, does it? As I am writing this, I am looking at Earth's twin moons, one of the few things that make me feel normal. I keep trying to remember what life used to be like before everything was gone. It is getting hard to remember things nowadays. I used to be very smart. I keep hearing voices inside of me, but I don't know who they are. Prominent among these are a girl named Vivian. She screams at me in crying wails that I am her father, but I have no children. I think. Fourth entry, Dear Diary, I wish I could find just one living thing. Anything would do. In 10 years I haven't found one thing to keep me company. I would even take a despicable weed like a dandelion. I think I would call it Dandy. That annoying voice in my head keeps yelling at me, begging me to remember my daughter. I think a daughter is a kind of human, but I can't remember, everything is so fuzzy. Anyway, humans haven't existed in 10 years. Fifth entry, Dear Diary, I am still in that one place I've been in for a while. There is plenty of stuff here. The food tastes terrible, much like turquoise used to when everything was here. I forgot to tell you. Everything is gone. I don't know why, but I want to know why. The thing in my head has quieted down now. I am very pleased, but also sad. I had good conversations with it, but lately it's been a real jerk and hasn't responded. I think I am going to take a nice walk now. Final entry, Dear Diary, today I am exploring a big round place in this big white building. I found this small thing in the shape of a rectangle. It had one of those red fruits on it, but it was black and had a bite taken out of it. I tapped it and it turned on. There were letters on the bottom. They said, slide here to unlock. I slid my finger there. Then the screen changed. It was now a picture of something in a fancy suit with a sideways triangle right in the middle. I hit the triangle to see its face better, but then the screen moved. It started talking to me. I wrote down what it said. This is President Atwood. I know who is listening to this. Your name is William Cordell. You are the last man on Earth. You are probably searching for answers. This should hopefully answer some questions for you. You are infected. You have a disease that gradually slows the function of the brain. Once the brain is essentially dead, it will start to break down all other cells in the body. You are the only infected left. We had managed to quarantine all of the infected, but they all died. Except for you. You have the virus, but it seems as if the brain deterioration stage is greatly slowed. Unfortunately, it has not stopped. you will eventually lose your memories and your life too. You and you alone could determine the fate of all of Earth's life, and you did the noble thing, you stayed behind. When the first signs of the affliction appeared, you designed a giant space station that could hold all of Earth's population, never knowing the whole time that you could never come on it. We followed your plan. We have left the Earth for the safety of billions of plant, animal, and human lives. Everybody, except for you, perhaps the most brilliant man ever to live. It pains me to leave you so alone, but you can always see us, and we can always see you. Your family will be trying to talk to you through your brain neurotransmitter. If you ever need reassurance, just look to the sky and you will see us right by Earth's moon. On behalf of the human race comes a big thank you for saving our lives and making a noble sacrifice. We will never forget you, even though you will forget us. So at least I am not alone. There is some other guy like me out there on a planet called Earth who was all alone as well, abandoned by his people, humans they were called, and left to live a life of exile. Too bad I haven't found out about everything that disappeared here. Sometimes I feel as if I never will. The Abandoned Railway. Haunted. I swear, it was the railway. I cannot remember. Whoever is reading this. I could be read Johnny off of a piece of paper. What do you reckon this could be about? Questioned Johnny, my partner for most of our investigations. He had no idea of what this meant. It seemed to involve something about a railway which was haunted. I have no bloody clue, I replied hastily. At the top of the paper read a year, 1986. 90 AY6 EY. How the frickin' hell could this VE lasted for 20 some years? Must have been very strong paper, said Johnny, surprised. However, I was not too bothered about the strength of the paper. What I was bothered about was the clues of the paper. It appeared to be from someone who could have died. Although that would be the biggest possibility, I didn't rule out some other ones too. A railway, an abandoned railway, ran not far off the edge of town, through a vast forest which spanned a great amount of space. It has been out of service since the late 80s/early 90s. I don't have a brilliant memory, so don't always rely on my information. But I suppose the paper could be referring to this railway. The line of the railway terminated in our village, which I cannot mention for privacy reasons. Although the tracks went on from the terminus, the part then on was infested with tall grass and small trees, making it inaccessible if traveling by train. Most of it was blocked off by a fence, but it was easily avoidable if you walked. According to many people around town, they say that this part was blocked off due to unusual happenings along this section. As Johnny and I went off around town with the paper, I asked several locals about it, and if they knew anything about it. But each time I asked someone, they seemed to ignore me, shrugging me off as if I was a prankster. No one which I came across actually answered me, leading to Johnny growing impatient and randomly shouting out, "The heck you guys thinking?" as we approached the library. Despite my growing fatigue and impatience too, I remained calm, hoping to find some kind of person who help us. "Shut up, Johnny," I replied. "What's your problem, mate?" he asked, seemingly annoyed. I didn't reply. "You gonna speak or what?" He spoke as if he was more superior than me. Again, I didn't reply. I couldn't be arsed to answer a person who kept on nagging me for a while. "Hey, ya know what, mate? I'm off now. You're too much of a borin' F." And he left for home. But before he escaped my sight, I questioned loudly, "Are you still part of my investigation?" "No, this is boring hell out of me, it's creeping me out you as well." What a baby. He acted like a 3-year-old child. Now that's quite pathetic for an 18-year-old cool kid, or at least that's what he considered himself. I was going solo now. I quickly forgot the childish actions of Johnny, and strolled along towards the village's single library. There was not a single person in my sight. As I crept past with my paper, an old man caught my eye after he seemed to wave at me. For some reason, he called me over. "Please excuse me, But, do you have a piece of paper about the abandoned railway? He asked. Yes, I do. How did you notice? I was quite nervous due to the fact that he was a stranger. Yeah, funny. Please see me tonight by the railway bridge. One question. Who the hell are you? I looked up, but he walked off without reply. I didn't get any glimpse of his face, but he had a black leather jacket, and some strange-looking black jeans. He had wrinkly hands, leading to my theory of him being old. But moving on, with some minor fear, I assumed he was going to kidnap me. But my curiosity overpowered my fear. I decided to go ahead and visit him. From my hospital bed, I now regret this decision with an even larger fear. So later that night I set off from home, but again with Johnny beside me as he had reversed his decision to quit. Also, my friend Evelyn had decided to join us out of curiosity. We approached the railway bridge, the only one in the area. No street lamps were located anywhere, so we were slightly paranoid. The railway was covered with grass, leaving the tracks resembling a pathway. They could be accessed through here too, down the embankment by the bridge. In the distance was a bright figure which looked humanoid, and I flinched. Shaking with slight fear, I took the courage to slide down the embankment and approach it. Evelyn was more courageous than Johnny, so we left him behind. He watched on. As we approached the figure, he hissed, Your people disposed of me, and my railway." It was the man from before. I got to stare at, wait, he didn't have a face. "Oh, my fucking God." I nervously spoke. "Why are you picking on me?" I was a man who was gotten rid of right here by some of the villagers. I was a criminal. I haunted this part of the railway since 1986. Since then, they haven't used this part. It then jumped towards me and Evelyn, and I blacked out. The next thing I woke up in a hospital bed. "Oh, you're awake," said the nurse joyfully. "What happened?" I asked, injured. "You were found unconscious on the abandoned railway," she replied. I was silent. "Along with this piece of paper." "Did you find the attacker?" desperately asking. "Attacker? You weren't attacked." "What?" And I just decided to forget about these events as I curled into a ball and hid under my bed cover. 2 days later, boy found unconscious on abandoned railway appeared in the local papers. The beginning part read, an 18-year-old man was found unconscious on the village's abandoned railway last week, after being attacked by an unknown source. The man, who did not want to be named, was found in the early hours by a dog walker who spotted him from the forest bridge and called police. Another part read, investigations have gone underway to search for the attacker, which police have believed has not been identified. However, other sources have mentioned that he had not been attacked by anyone. The man has yet to be interviewed. Apparently, that frightening man has not been found. No traces, no evidence, nothing. I'm slightly paranoid now. I feel too scared to go outdoors now. This incident has really scared me very much. I do hope I'm only dreaming. 42. My new apartment used to be a Santeria chapel. Before I moved in, an older woman lived here and was known in my Dominican neighborhood of Brooklyn as a healer and spiritual guide. The man who lived downstairs told me that people would come to see her every day, bringing birds, chickens, mice, or lizards with them. My neighbor told me he even saw a goat once. The woman would use the animals in her practices. I stupidly asked my neighbor what he meant when he said that. He drew his finger across his neck, and just said, "Rough stuff went on in there, man." When I saw the apartment, the woman's stuff was still there. It was quietly furnished with lots of floral prints, the kind of kitschy stuff you remember from your grandmother's house. There were pictures of the Virgin Mary everywhere. And behind a curtain in the living room, there was a small room which held the remains of her altar. It was covered in pictures of Jesus, photos of the woman's family, but also crude drawings of a man in black with black eyes and too many fingers on each hand. All of the stuff, the landlord assured me, would be out once the previous tenant's family came to retrieve it. He also mentioned that the apartment would be carefully cleaned and inspected before anyone else could move in. The woman, I learned later, had been hospitalized by her family after suffering a nervous breakdown. My neighbor told me later that she would climb the stairs over and over again, whispering in Spanish that a demon was inside her brain. She'd lived in the apartment so long that it was technically hers by New York law. The family hadn't wanted it, and had reverted title back to my current landlord for some sum of money. He was eager to get it off the market. I told him I couldn't afford an expensive place. He said I could name my price. I did, and after surprisingly little haggling, he agreed. The apartment's past didn't bother me. In fact, I was amused by it. It would be cool to tell guests that the couch they were sitting on was the spot where a witch had summoned the forces of darkness for her unknown purposes. You know, as an icebreaker. The apartment was centrally located not far from a cool, hip part of the city. I found myself going out a lot, meeting people in the neighborhood and getting sufficiently wasted. And since I didn't have to go far, it only took a month to get used to the stumbling home routine. One thing I've always done as a way of keeping myself awake and grounded, even when drunk, is by counting everything. It got to the point that I could predict the number of times I could tap the handrail on the train between local subway stops. I could snap my fingers a precise amount of times before the crosswalk signal at my intersection changed. I would always count out loud the 41 steps it took to get from the front door to my apartment door. And home felt like home. I never felt creeped out in there, no spirits or demons bothered me. The only person who ever felt unnerved by the place was my friend Jen, who said that sitting on my couch felt like sitting in a cold, drafty room. When she came over, she stuck to the kitchen. And then a week or so ago, I was drunk and was coming up the stairs when something immediately didn't feel right. I was struck by panic, something primal that seized at my heart and made it beat faster. Because I was drunk, I was disoriented and I didn't know right away what was wrong. The place was well lit. The door behind me had locked. I looked around to see if someone was above, behind or below me, but there was nobody there. I resumed walking up the stairs, counting out loud, when I realized that my counting was off somehow. These didn't feel like the right numbers for these steps. And it turned out I was right. When I got to my door, I'd counted 42 steps, not 41. Somehow I'd added a step in there. I'm not sure why it bothered me so much, but it did. It did so much, in fact, that I went back downstairs to the front door and did it again. I counted every step all the way up to my apartment, sobering up in the process. When I got to my door, I got the same thing again, 42 steps. I shrugged and went to bed. The next day, after I'd gotten over my hangover, I tried it again. And I got 42 again. I didn't understand. I must have missed a step all those other times. Something about the way I was going up the stairs now had rediscovered it. I even had Jen come over and count the steps. She also came up with 42. She laughed at how perplexed and bothered I was by the whole thing. She made spooky noises and said the demon in my apartment was trying to fuck with me and drive me crazy, like the old lady. I told her that if it was haunted, they were going to have to pull out the big guns to get me out of a 2-bedroom apartment in NYC for less than $1,000 a month. Still, the discrepancy continued to weigh on my mind. I found myself counting everything, even when I wasn't drunk. How many seconds it took to ride the elevator at work. The time my different coworkers took for their lunch. The average amount of people on my train car coming home from work. And of course, the steps up to my apartment. I'd never been OCD before, but I found myself paying attention to everything, unable to distinguish between what was important and what was mundane. When something out of the ordinary happened, it jolted me, but not as much as the extra step in my staircase. Over a few days, though, it began to bother me less. I realized that Jen was right, I was overreacting. I probably wasn't the keenest of observers while 3 sheets to the wind, so I should forget it. And I would have until tonight. Because I just came up the stairs to my apartment, and as I reached my door I was chilled to the bone. Because I didn't get 42 steps this time. I got 44. Credited to Come Brooklyn. If you enjoyed these stories, hit subscribe for more.